Good evening, everyone. This is Doug Badnock. I'm the president of the board of directors for Intermountain Opera, and I'm here to welcome you all tonight to the final installation of our 5-part webinar, How Do You Solve a Problem Like Mikado? Tonight we've got a great program. We have 4 panelists tonight from the Asian Opera Alliance. Tonight we welcome Andrew Chang, who's an assistant professor of voice at Oklahoma State. Robert Feng, who is a wonderful librettist and one of the great bass singers that we've run across. Nina Yashita Nelson, who is a co-founder of the Asian Opera Alliance. And Elaine Huang, who is a great soprano and award-winning performer from around the world. I'd like to also introduce our moderator tonight, Jody Palin. Jody is Assistant Dean of Arts and Architecture at Montana State University. I'd like to welcome you to this last installment and also to encourage you, if you haven't gone to see the Montana Mikado, to take it on. I've seen 2 performances of it this weekend, and it is hilarious. So just a plug for that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jody. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Doug, and welcome. I'm so pleased to be able to moderate this panel. This process for us as the Intermountain Opera started last year, and we decided that in taking on the Montana Mikado, that we had a lot of issues that we could address as not only as a board, as a community. And so this is the 5th of 5 seminars, webinars that we've hosted. And I'm super proud to have you here with us tonight. So when I first heard about the Asian Opera Alliance, I had never heard of it. And so would somebody be willing to tell us a little bit about the Asian Opera Alliance? Like how long you've been around, what was the reason for forming? What are some of the goals and visions your organization has?
Thank you. I'll take that question. So the Asian Opera Alliance, AOA, has been around since spring of 2021. We're a pretty new group.
Oh.
Most excitingly, as of this month, we are now an official nonprofit. So we are super excited about that. And the 3 other people joining me today are part of our new board. And so in spring of 2021, right after the shootings in Atlanta, an opera company put up a social media post that said, "We support our Asian artists," and they shared pictures of their Asian artists. I was in one of those pictures, and as I looked at these pictures that they had posted, I saw that every single Asian artist that they were supporting had all been typecast into Asian identifying roles. And I wrote to a friend of mine who worked at this opera company, and I said, so the next step in opera has to be that we stop pigeonholing Asian artists into Asian roles. And she asked me, so Nina, in a typical season, how many non-Asian roles do you sing? And I had never taken the time to stop and think about it. And so I started, it happened to be the same weekend that I got my vaccine, and I was kind of lying in bed doing nothing, feeling kind of gross. So I started counting. I've done, over 150 Suzukis. I've done 7 or 8 other world premieres of Asian identifying characters. Some of them I've done multiple times, lots of concerts. And in the span of 10 years, I had sung 3 non-Asian roles. So this was a surprise to me. And if this was a surprise to me, how would anyone else know what's happening to our Asian artists? So a few of us formed together and said, it's time to start sharing our stories. Most importantly, if nobody is aware of what's happening, how can we ever create change? So our first goal was to share our stories. And then as we formed, we decided we were going to send a letter to all of the general directors of American opera companies advocating for Asian representation, both on stage, behind the scenes, in the production teams, in the boardroom, just across the board, in small roles, in big roles. We want to see, not just the Asians singing the Asian roles. We want to also see Asians singing Romeo or Juliet, or and we want to see our stages looking like our society. And so since spring of 2021, we've been around, and we've been meeting with opera companies, talking about how they can make changes to have greater representation, what steps they can take. We've been advising on, butterfly productions, how we do Orientalism in today's society, today's world. And it's really exciting to be here.
Thank you, Nina. That's exciting that it's such a new company, but I understand with what's going on in our world right now, why it's important for this advocacy to happen. What personally brought you to the membership with the Asian Opera Alliance? And why is it so important for you to be a member?
I would take that question. So first of all, I'm an international student who is starting in voice performance DMA right now. And experiencing in the school, it's actually really differences between like in school and in the actually audition for the theater. And I have been auditioned for several theater, and I have been performing in the university wide. But still, I figure out there's something happening in this industry, and which makes me somehow feeling uncomfortable with. And I starting question myself, like, what can I do and what should I do? And then I actually, last year, I see the New York Times from Nina, and the post, and that was very encouraging me myself, and I starting realize that instead of waiting for guidance from those those singer who has already have friend, how about just starting from myself? As my generation, I can help each other and to in creating more secure environment for all of our singers, also can help myself to experience this industry. So that's why it took me to join the AOA. I don't know what is like Robert think or other people think.
Well, I can actually tag on. One of the reasons I wanted to join was because I have sort of transitioned into a more education focused role as my primary profession. And I think one of the really important things is that while it is an industry issue, that within the educational world that we basically make it one of our issues as well, because a lot of educational institutions partner with not-for-profit opera organizations, symphonies, and the like. And the more that we as educational entities can sort of show what we find important, the more we can actually tie it in with some of the industry in a way that begins this sort of community building association. A lot of people, again, don't realize, like, Nina was saying, she didn't realize that she'd only sung 3 non-Asian roles in 10 years. I mean, as an Asian opera singer, as an opera singer, not even Asian, as an opera singer, you sort of take what you can get as much as you can. And so sometimes you don't realize that you've fallen into this sort of hole, not necessarily a hole, but this sort of very specific niche. And as a result, you start realizing that your entire career is built around the fact that you look a certain way, as opposed to the art that you're able to create or the voice that you actually have. And I think, one of the biggest things that we want to make sure that we engender, especially with students and the next generation of singers and everyone that's already in the industry, is that it's really important for us to be at the forefront and to be people that want change and are showing change, so that it doesn't just become a flash in the pan, and it actually leads to some actual discernible change, for the next generation. I mean, like, as I've become more into education, I start thinking more about the actual systemic issues as opposed to sort of what directly impacts me. And so for me, it's just seeing people lifted in a certain way, where it's not about the fact that they look a certain way. It's the fact that they are great at what they do. And there are so many great Asian opera singers that just don't have the opportunity to experience and to show off what they can do with some of these really seminal roles. I mean, most of these roles have just so much humanity in them, and it has nothing to do with ethnicity at all. I mean, in Montana Mikado, I mean, you're able to change the setting at a snap of a finger. And so as a result, I think it's really important that we make ourselves known, that we are here to help embolden Asian singers and embolden companies to start just embracing the fact that there are communities that have not been served as much.
I agree. Thank you, Elaine and Andre. I think that what we've realized too is being in Montana, we don't have the opportunity a lot of times for the diversity that we would like in our communities. But what we can do is be good allies, and we can educate ourselves. And this last 5 weeks, I think, has really been important to have conversations. Like last week, we had a panel of students from the Asia group, which is an Asian student group at Montana State, do a panel. And a lot of my friends were like, because they talked about stories that they had, things that have happened to them in Bozeman, and people are like, that isn't our Bozeman. And I'm like, it is, it is. It's the truth of what we're dealing with. But, by deciding to talk about why we changed it to Montana Mikado, I think it's been an opportunity to really educate ourselves and be true allies, because I don't think a lot of us really maybe even thought about it, which is sad. We go to the opera, they sing, but definitely after this, I'm going to be looking, just to see, whether it's front of the stage or back of the stage, are we really doing a good job in educating our town and bringing people to our town, so I appreciate your guys' answers to that. So another question I had was, what role do you think that the Asian Opera Alliance can play in moving towards a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive art form?
So I can actually start this one. I feel like we could all talk about this one for a while.
Yeah.
So our main goal, and one of the founding sort of principles of the organization, is to provide a resource, right, for American opera companies, to allow them to have a place that they can go if they are leaning in this direction of wanting to embrace the diversification and to really give part of their community that's not been represented an actual chance for representation. One of the things that's really important is representation. And I mean, it's just when you see someone doing something on stage who looks like you, it is a really powerful message, a really powerful image, and it's incredibly empowering for the dreams of the younger generation. And so, I mean, this is not only just on the stage, but seeing more people of a diverse background in positions of power and positions of influence, board members. It just really starts to, again, grow this idea that this isn't just a fever dream, or as my parents called it, a hobby. And so one of the things that we want to do is we hope that, like with the Black Opera Alliance and other advocates in our industry, that we can really expand the diversity to a point where it is not looked at as, oh, look at this great diverse cast. More like, oh, look at this awesome show. These are incredible artists. They are, and the diversity is just inherent, because that's how life is now, right? I mean, I live in Oklahoma, and it's not exactly the most diverse area as well, but I mean, I see these elements of diversity coming through with the people I'm around through the university and in different situations where I never thought it would be. And so the big thing is for us to be advocates for a diverse future for opera. And I think the organization is currently working with a lot of different opera companies and advising them on different butterfly processes, different aspects within the actual cultural zeitgeist, within Asian cultural zeitgeist, sort of, butterflies, Turandots, to, really make sure that we understand what the point of the story was, and to really, be true and celebrate Asian heritage, but also to allow those artists to not just be pigeonholed into, oh, hey, we're doing a butterfly, can you come back in 4 years? and to really acknowledge the fact that these artists that you hire for Butterflies that, you know, can bring a really interesting and new, not necessarily new, but a really authentic way to look at the show, that those artists also have the opportunity with, you know, Romeo and Juliet, Mary de Figaro, Don Giovanni, in a way to bring an experience that really shows off what artistry is within the Asian community, and sort of, you know, lifting our own advocacy in that way. So that's sort of the main talking points, I would say, at least on my end.
Thank you, Andre.
Can I add a little bit to that
Please.
as well?
Yes.
So something that we're starting to see as companies are starting to announce their next seasons is new bold statements about, you know, maybe they've changed their mission statement or whatever. And one of the statements that we're seeing is diverse or, you know, inclusive. But I challenge all of those companies that are changing these sayings to make sure that when you are looking at what you are casting, that you are actually casting a rainbow of identities. You know, diversity is not binary, and it's something that we see a lot with the Asian Opera Alliance, is that, you know, a company will say, well, we do have, you know, someone of color, and so we are diverse. But are you casting lots of people of different colors? And sometimes it takes being really mindful, and for a while it will take that that mindfulness of making these changes until then it becomes a normal thing that we see. Right now we haven't seen it, and especially for like what Andre was saying, you know, other cultures have had famous singers for generations, you know, Jesse Norman, Pavarotti, you know, Renee Fleming, whatever. How many Asian singers can you name? And so if Asian singers have no blueprint towards what a successful career looks like, how can we ever get more Asian singers involved in our industry?
Thank you, Nina. Does anyone else want to add anything about that?
Well, I'd like to add, you know, growing up as a student in university, whenever we referenced something or whenever I wanted to watch an opera, I definitely didn't have a reference of like a golden age singer or a household name Asian singer to really look at, and it never really struck me as too weird because, you know, I was always told, oh, that's just how it is, or that's just how it was. Um, but I think once you start to see that inclusion and that diversity on the stage, you know, just like how now we have an Asian superhero in the Marvel movie, and kids look up to that. You know, it really does change your perspective on what can be possible and what you are capable of.
Thank you, Robert. I feel like I understand on some level. I grew up on the Flathead Indian Reservation, and you know, when I first started seeing Native American people representing someone just doing something regular, you know, it wasn't somebody like, you know, like building a teepee or putting up a teepee or beading, you know, it was just like, I just wanted to see a Native American that would just like go to the grocery store and wash their car, you know, like, and when I saw that, it really inspired me to start looking at roles that I maybe never considered myself to be fit for. And I see that, you know, a lot on campus where students just don't think of themselves as leaders or singers or, you know, craftsmen or artsmen or whatever. And I think that by having that example of diversity shown, like you were saying, Nina, all different types of people, just like the United States is, I think it's encouraging to students to try things that they might not try. What role do you think that the Asian Opera Alliance can play in moving towards, oh wait, I already did that one. What are some specific steps artistic directors and opera boards can take to be more inclusive, including casting, content, decision makers, EDI trainings, education, outreach, membership, demographics, audience, etc.?
I would take that one. So I think the most important thing is, like Nina said, we have to consistently showing up. It's not only like one time you have something like, okay, we are doing this and we are diverse and that's it, then end up. It should be like consistently showing up like every year and frequently, and like building up the awareness for people, like we are educating people to do this. That's the first one. And I also think, because you mentioned about demographics, and I also think the doing a significant research on local demographics also is very important. It's not only in the theaters, but also like local people. What is the combination of the people in this local, and how can we serve them? That brings to the next level, like how can we making the connection with those local communities, including like AOA or like local like different kind of the local communities is very important. And the also I think that selecting repertoires that require diverse casting, which is everybody is talking about that, but not really showing up in every seasons. And I think the very important for myself, I think it's important to knowledge of international hiring practice, because as an international student who is going to graduate, there's not much opera theater knows how to hire an international students. I mean, people who from foreign country, they probably don't know what is OPT, what is CPT, what is A1, what is O1, what is H1B. Those are different kind of visa types for people who is working in the US. And I look a lot of the opera company, they have their hire and they say, we require you have the green card at first. So that's the primary, the first thing you need to have. But for those people who is from the other countries, they might finding a job here, they want to sing here, and they don't have the chance to get a green card at first. So for those opera company, I think it's also important for them to doing some research of that. Not only to hire the people who already have a green card or citizenship, but also hire the people from international. I don't know if other people have anything want to say.
I'd love to jump in there too. So one of the things we advocate for obviously is diverse casting. And if we are casting Asians in, say, Madam Butterfly, please also hire them for non-Asian roles in a season before or a season after or the same season. Because what I didn't even know, pigeonholing is a form of racism. I've been asked to do Suzuki at a company and I've done nothing. And then the next time they do Butterfly, they call me and ask me to do Suzuki again. And how are we ever supposed to get out of this cycle? Another thing that we can do is we can design new productions like you guys have, right? We are now living in a multicultural society. Why do we keep remounting these Eurocentric productions? There is no reason for us to keep remounting these productions, except for the fact that, yes, it does save money. So if you have decided you're going to do a butterfly that's a very Eurocentric butterfly, make sure that one of the things that you're doing is that you are having the conversations around these productions like you are with, Montana Mikado, and like, other companies are. It's important that if we do present operas that may be problematic in one way or another, that we are having the difficult conversations and we are educating and we are learning and we are growing, because we don't need to live in this Eurocentric version of what opera is. Here we are, we have so many wonderful creative people. Let's be creative and make new art. Another big thing we can do is we can include diverse voices in the decision-making process. Opera has been for a very long time, there's one person at the head of a company that makes the decisions for that company for the whole season or for 10 seasons or whatever. But what happens if we include diverse voices when we're making these decisions and we talk about what the consequences might be or might not be for the communities that surround us? So those are some other things that we can do to help create a more diverse and equitable field.
Thank you. That's great. What role do you think that art institutions in general can play in reducing discrimination against Asian Americans within the world of opera and more generally?
I'd like to take this one. So yeah, going back to the whole representation thing and how I spent my university years, I think it's very important that we have these voices on stage and, for other, not just Asian audiences to see, but for all audiences to see, because we are people and we have so many stories to tell through opera. The saying, life imitates art far more than art imitates life, couldn't be more true for our industry. So, I'm hoping that we do get household names that we can reference or show on these recordings for students to look at. And I think one of the most important things as well is, a lot of people talk about just cancel Butterfly or cancel Mikado, and I don't think that is the solution, because it's an easy way out to not talk about some of the problematic issues that might be in these operas or in the history of the operas that have been performed over the years. And how do we learn as a society and grow instead of just throwing it all away?
Mhm. Thank you, Robert. Does anyone have anything else to add to that question?
Well, I also wanted to say, I mean, what y'all are doing is really great. I mean, the education surrounding any sort of either change in a work that can bring up some more controversial or more evocative topics is great. I remember I did a Death of Klinghoffer at Opera Theater St. Louis, and they had a whole set of panels, much like this, where they were talking about the sort of the issues within that sort of conflict on the boat, and the Jewish issues and the sort of terrorist issues as well. And they brought attention to a show that is not really well known, and sort of gave it new life because they spent the time to really show the community why they're doing this. And this is one of the things, and so I think this is actually a great model for a lot of other opera companies to just take the time to show your community that you care about this aspect of them. You care about making sure that everyone feels seen and that everyone has a chance to be a part of this art form. And to me, that is one of the biggest things in terms of being a thought leader, in terms of being the opera company of the region. Like there are some very distinct things that I think not-for-profits have, sort of similar to like the land grant institution idea, where there are things that are really inherent that in order to continue the progression of society, in order to continue the growth of a community, that you need to make sure that everyone feels seen, everyone feels like they have a chance to be promoted and spotlighted, and everyone gets a chance to really show off what they love to do. And I just, I want to make sure that we really acknowledge the fact that this is really cool and this is a really great way for companies to really start thinking about their seasons, right? And so this is something they can start programming within the community. So the community starts being like, oh, we're going to do interesting work. This interesting work is going to come with the requisite amount of preparation, and the company's really committed to it. And so we will have a deeper understanding of what's happening. So when we see the show, it won't just be like, oh, it's a wonderful evening of entertainment. It'll be like, I really see what the value of Intermountain Opera Bozeman is to our community and to all of the parts of the community. And so I think that is one of the biggest things that is incredibly important. Just spending the time for education, because it's just vital.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pop in with a quick interruption.
the question about what is a butterfly.
Yeah, that's the question I think that we'd all like to know, those of us who aren't opera aficionados.
So when we talk about butterfly, we're talking about Madama Butterfly, Madame Butterfly by Puccini. And it's the story of a Japanese geisha marrying an American naval officer, and as he goes to Japan. And so it's, you know, it's one of the most beloved operas. It's in our operatic canon. Opera companies do it all the time because it's absolutely the most beautiful music you've ever heard. But we get into some of these traps of, you know, using our Asian artists, or something we like to talk about is like character versus caricature, making sure that we're not making caricatures out of the Asian people that are on a stage. So that's what we refer to when we're referring to butterfly.
Thank you, Nina. So kind of as Andre was noting, we have hosted several webinars over the past month relating to racism, discrimination, bias, microaggressions, representation of Asians in art and film, the model minority myth, and how to be an ally. Which of these topics resonates most with your experience, and which are of most importance to you to address or change? And which of these topics do you have a personal connection to?
So I think I'll start on this one, and I'm pretty sure we all can throw in our 2 cents on this one. You know, so just a brief amount of background. I was born in Mobile, Alabama in the 1980s. So it was a very particular time in Alabama, and I was born and raised. I went to school in Alabama for undergrad, and you know, then moved all around doing opera stuff. You know, but one of the things that I really, again, really feel strongly about is the representation, and the fact that you put people out and spotlight them front and center, and you allow people to see other people like them when they are dreaming of what they could be, right? When I was looking for colleges, I remember very distinctly being recruited by a ton of the same person, and seeing a singular Asian tenor that tried to recruit me. And you know, looking at my field right now, I mean, it's just a similar sort of thing. You know, there are some disciplines that are definitely more representative in terms of Asian cultures, right? But certain aspects of it have not necessarily been as brought up, you know. And I think one of the big things is to really focus on how this creation can really just take into account different voices, different people. And to me, that's sort of the biggest thing. I mean, you know, I'm sure I could talk about microaggressions and discrimination and everything. I mean, again, growing up in Alabama, it wasn't a cakewalk in terms of those things. And as a result, I actually felt I had to diminish my Chinese heritage in order to fit into a very specific group of people that would not judge me in a certain way, to the point where it was great when some of my friends would be like, "Oh, we don't even think of you as an Asian person," you know. And back in the day, I was like, "That's great. That means I'm doing my job." But you know, there's been years upon years of just repression in that way that I feel like hasn't necessarily stunted my growth as a human, but has really taken away some of the culture, the color, the glorious, the flavor that comes with having a unique heritage and a unique perspective. And I think, you know, instead of feeling like we have to adjust and change, we want to make sure that everyone feels open and available to be who they are and show who they are, and embrace their heritage. I mean, like, I actually really love assigning repertoire that is really evocative of, I have some First American students, and I was like, you know, do you have any pieces that you want to work on? I think it's really important to sort of sing what sort of you identify with. And in that way, it brings out the different colors, but also to like allow people, you know, because opera is a, you know, in a lot of ways should be colorblind in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, colorblind has a weird connotation at some points, but I think in terms of the general canon Magic Flutes of the world, the Barber Sevilles of the world, that none of those are affected by having an Asian lead or an African American lead or a Latino lead. Like, in fact, I think it brings a really awesome new color, and the interactions between them are something that we as a modern melting pot of a community can really assign value to, right? And that's the biggest thing. Like, we have to value diversity as opposed to just glorify it. Yes, we have diversity. We have to be like, this actually has value for our community, and that's why we want to promote it, and that's why we want to be mindful of it.
Thank you, Andre. That's really powerful. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add to that? Or should we go on to the next?
I can always add more.
Good, Nina. I'm glad I can count on you.
So, you know, in your question about how does all of this stuff affect us, you know, the model minority myth and microaggressions and whatever. My story is that I'm half Japanese American. I'm fourth generation. My grandparents were interned during World War II, and so very little Japanese heritage has reached my generation. As a young person, I identified as Californian, Southern Californian, a daughter. You know, even now, I identify as a mother and a wife, and so many other things before I identify as Asian. The first time that really kind of shook me was when I was in junior high school, and we were given I think it was an English class. We were supposed to write a compare and contrast essay between myself and a famous person on TV who looked like me. And there was nobody. I'm probably going to say my age a little bit, but the person I wrote about was Shannon Doherty, because she had a round face and dark hair. And that was like as close as I could get. And I remember having this conversation with my mom saying, "Mom, no one looks like me." And it wasn't really until I became an opera singer that I realized that people identified me as Asian, and that also the way other people see me is as powerful as how I see myself. And so it wasn't until I started being typecast into Suzuki and Madame Butterfly that I was like, oh man, I better learn how to be Japanese. What does that mean? You know, because I look one way, but that's not part of my actual culture. So I think that, you know, especially in the United States, as we are now removed generations and generations, a lot of us, from, you know, our ancestors who came here from other lands, so much of our culture is more American culture, melting pot, right? Rather than, oh, Nina looks Asian, so she's, you know, Japanese. And so I think this is something, you know, this representation, it's really important that not only do we identify people, but we take the time to let people identify themselves as well.
I like
would
that.
also like to add to the question. So yeah, as a librettist, a lot of the experiences that I have, as well as, you know, friends and family have had, sort of make their way into my work. No matter what, you know, if I try to make it not happen, it's not going to work. Um, and the funny thing is, the stories don't have to be about Asian stories necessarily, but it just creeps its way through. And I think so I write a lot of horror opera, and so one of my big inspirations is Jordan Peele. And you know, I think the ability to make a story that everyone can appreciate and enjoy, but also, you know, if you do personally have that experience, it hits different. You know, for instance, the feeling of being othered. You know, I think if an Asian person watches that, it'll sort of be like a reference, or something that hits a little bit different. And so I try to put that into each one of my works.
Nice. I like that, Robert. What vision do you have for the future world of opera? And what would you like to see happen?
I'd also like to take this one. Yeah, in the future, ideally, it should just be stories about humanity, as the focus, not about me being Asian or, oh, look, there is an Asian on stage, that many different people on stage should be the norm, and people should think that that's normal. And that way we can focus on the drama, the human aspect of it. And it all goes back to good representation in all aspects of the field as well. Behind the stage, in administrative offices, and it all works together to create an equitable industry that we can all thrive in and find success in and have hope for the future in. So that's what I see in the future. That's what I'd want to see.
Yeah, I keep coming back to it's human stories. We're human beings above anything else. And we have human relationships. We all know what it's like to love, what it's like to be angry, what it's like to lose something or someone. And if we can connect on that level, it's so much more powerful than seeing, a little Japanese person walking around on stage like this, It's what creates beauty, and it's what also creates change, and it's how we can really make impact. So if focusing on these human ideas and emotions, that's where opera really should go.
Yeah, I also think there's a great amount of cultural, and especially in the United States, a great amount of difference within different regions. And like y'all are doing again the Montana Mikado, I think there's a lot of room for regionalism to also be very alive in opera, and opera to not just try to necessarily, the human story is evident within everything, but sometimes we use a very broad canvas for the human story, and I think sometimes the things that can bring more people into an area, bring more people into the opera house, is really the idea that we can show stories that they can immediately relate to, that are human, that show the broadness of the community, and basically become an art form of the people again, become an art form that really tells these deep emotional stories through, the grandeur of singing, right? Opera is all about the voice being a visceral element of drama, and using that voice is an incredible, I think, gift and benefit for opera. Like no amplification. There's a lot of really cool things that happen when you hear an opera singer just really wailing out a high, low note, even a middle note, I don't know, or a long run. And so I think the biggest thing is just like allowing, empowering the companies and the future opera creators to not try to just, oh, we have to rely on these standards, to like find ways to create, find ways to innovate, find ways to promote operas in a way that can really connect with your community. Because if you get them in the door, or for instance with the Montana Mikado, that means that I saw you were doing a Les Notes de Figaro. That means that they're going to go see Les Notes de Figaro because they understand that the community is like, oh, they're doing this show in Montana. That means I'm interested in see what this would actually be about. And even if it's a traditional opera, they can see how, oh, okay, opera is both. Opera is all. Opera isn't just stuck in this or this. And then the variety starts to, again, give us more opportunities for different stories and for more human interactions, really.
I also want to continue with that. I think I see opera as a very interesting way to deliver all the information we got right now. So instead of the telling the old story again and again, this is a really good way to, like Nana said, create a new opera and to deliver the new information and the things we want to educate our next generations. That's a very good way to deliver those information. So that's what, like personally, I want to see that.
That would be wonderful. I love that. So what are we not talking about that is important to bring up?
I think there are a couple things that we have not yet brought up that are important to bring up. One of which is, this world that we're living in right now of cancel culture. And if something is too problematic, let's just cancel it. I've had several productions that have just been canceled because maybe it's too touchy of a time to produce this opera right now, whatever opera it is. But if we are just saying, let's cancel it, everyone's seen this opera enough, no need to do it again. Are we actually creating erasure? And I think this is really important because not only is opera about what we see on stage, but it's about what we learn and what we learn surrounding these productions. And so if we're just going and canceling everything because it's maybe not the right time to do it, we're seeing a whole lot of erasure and a whole lot of band-aids that are being put on things instead of creating actual change. And so I think that's a really big thing that we in our industry need to look at and think about, is this idea of erasure. Are we erasing Asian faces? Are we erasing, Hispanic faces, Black faces, and why? And instead of erasing them, let's surround ourselves and let's not just do an opera with only Asian people. Isn't that kind of some type of segregation again, right? Like, so I think these are several things that we need to think about. Another thing that I think is really important to think about that we haven't necessarily brought up yet, and I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts on this, is why are some of these operas that have become incredibly problematic, like Butterfly, Turandot, why are they still around? When there have been many other operas that have not survived this, the 200 years, 300 years, however many, these ones are still here. And if they're problematic, that's fine, but why are they still around? And I think that's something that we don't necessarily dig into enough. Why are they still here?
It's a great question.
And if
I
I,
s-
if I could,
sorry, no, Robert.
sorry, if I can add on to Nina's statement, yeah, I think that conversations like these and continuing to have these conversations, it might take multiple very difficult conversations to answer these questions, but the point is that we are having these conversations and we are communicating and coming to a conclusion, and it might not be right at first, but that's the whole process, and that's how we grow, because we are allowed to make mistakes and we are allowed to grow.
I was just going to say that people should not be ashamed to be allies. Should not be ashamed to want to know more about someone else's culture. Within the confines of not digging too deep, but like if a conversation is willing to be had, that people who want to know and want to be a part of it should feel emboldened to ask. I mean, we can always tell when certain things shouldn't be brought up in conversation, but like, in general, when things like this are coming up and when we're trying to really advocate for different underrepresented groups, it's really important that we have everyone be part of the journey, right? Like we're advocating Asian opera lines, so we're obviously advocating more for Asian opera singers, right? But it would not offend us to see other, like a whole diverse cast that isn't just like you were saying, not just Asian, like really represents a community of singers and the worldwide view that opera has. And to be honest, like that to me is one of the big things that I really think that should be taken away from this, that being an ally and being someone who says, yeah, I mean, I know I'm not of this ethnicity or this race, but I truly believe that diversity has a value, and that value I want to explore. I want to explore how that can be valuable, and to me, that's the first step for many, many, many things, and really will bring about, to me, the greatest amount of change.
Yeah. One thing I thought was really powerful, and I just encourage people that are attending this webinar to go out to the Asian Opera Alliance and go to their resource page. There's lots of books, there's videos to watch. There's no reason with those kind of resources that we can't educate ourselves and be better allies and support others in our communities. And so I agree, those things are very important to continue to be allies and to work in our communities to make sure that they're safe and that we do the work to educate ourselves. And I am really thankful, one, for Sarah Allen, she's on our board, but she had this vision of when we decided to do the Montana Mikado is not just to brush away and say, let's just forget that the Mikado and some of the problematic themes that are in it didn't exist and let's rewrite it. But instead, she led us as a board to really examine and look at ways that we could look at, well, why is it so problematic and what do we need to do as a community? And, hiding it wasn't an option. And what has happened is that through her wisdom and vision and the board's vision and Michael Saker, the artistic director, really saying, no, let's dig into this and lean in and really visit about, what things are problematic and what we can do in our communities. But I think it's made us, more applicable and more timely at this time. And it's given us different groups like the Asia group and different people that we've met with over these 5 weeks. But what else are we not talking about? Because it's super important to be allies. But I hear what you're saying, Nina, too, is that, for many, many years, I worked for Montana Shakespeare in the Parks, which is a traveling Shakespeare, in Montana. It's well known. It's in its 50, actually, this is its 50th year of bringing free Shakespeare to Montana and the surrounding states. So I'm super proud of it. But there would be plays that we would do, and I would think, is that what's best to bring these communities in Montana? Like how can we, and we all just kind of go, oh, well, that's Shakespeare, but how can we better, like not just saying, oh, we're not going to talk about this anymore, but maybe we can talk about the problematic things and what we can do to bring awareness or change. It's like, I feel like that art a lot of times, and I think Nina, you mentioned this too, it comes out of our souls. It's a personal story. And so I think that we as Intermountain Opera, we want to make sure that we tell the stories right. And that takes sitting down with people and maybe you guys would give us some feedback on how we can be better in our communities. That's what I would like. But, what else are we not talking about? Is there things that we can do better? Are there things that allies can do to bring awareness? Like how exactly, and, how exactly would you ask us to, help with this issue?
Well, already what you guys have done, I'm sure you have a whole new following of people, from the Montana Mikado. I've heard so many people in our industry talking about it, right? And honestly, I haven't heard a lot of people before talking about Intermountain Bozeman Opera. So it's really exciting for you guys. And when you're doing this type of work, think about all the new audiences that you are potentially bringing into your own company and who you are, exposing opera to. And I think it's really exciting.
Right.
Personally, I think, allies just keep on standing beside us and helping us bring up these issues because it's not going to go away after this season or next season. This is something that we're stuck with diversity in the United States. It's not going away.
Right.
And so why aren't we also adapting opera to it? And that includes stuff like, why not change the lyrics? So many of these operas have been out of like copyright or whatever for so many years. The music is gorgeous. Why don't we change some of the words? Why not? Like, there are so many things that we can do as allies to be more inclusive. And I think, it gets really scary a lot of times to think about, am I going to step on feet? Am I going to say something wrong? Am I going to, put my foot in my mouth? How, especially if you're not necessarily haven't been an activist before, right? But like, I think it was Andre that said, ask questions, ask us. Like we are here, Asian Opera Alliance, all of us are here as a resource and we want to share. And the first step in solving any of these problems is sharing our stories. And I think like that's where we are. Let's just stay together as a community and keep sharing and keep growing and building. And I think you know, that's where everyone else can help.
Any other comments that you'd like to make?
There's a question that's in the Q&A, and I think both Elaine and Andre can probably answer it. What role do academic institutions / music schools hold in diversification and representation efforts? How can academic institutions prepare singers, arts administrators, etc., for work in this field?
Oh, Elaine, you can start.
Oh yeah, okay. It's quite interesting because the Asian only take like 4% of the US population, but 7% of US orchestra musicians are Asians. And also at Juilliard School of Music, 1 in 5 undergraduates and 1 in 3 PhD students are Asians. So actually in my school right now, and we have almost the whole voice program, like I can say 80% we are Asian students, but like those schools still don't have the awareness to how to provide a secure environment to those Asian students, including like they selecting the repertoires, which is kind of really like if it's really like English and like old English repertoire, and they suspect that Asian students cannot speak English dialogue. So that's the problem for those schools. And I think it's good for them to build more awareness to provide equal chance for every student, especially for singers. And in spite of the language problem, you can teach them, you can coach them, you can give them opportunities. Don't just say no, because you are Asian, you cannot speak English. That's not true. I can speak English. I can speak well. So that's my personal experiences. I know Angel working in the university, maybe he can provide anything.
Yeah, I think universities in general, like opera companies, need to take a hard look at hiring practices, as well as programming, as well as programming, as well as the curriculum that's required, and how it's actually supporting the sort of new, more progressive idea of diversification and not staying entirely Eurocentric, at least in the music school. I would say in general, like, providing resources, like what we're trying to do, providing resources as a university for students who don't have necessarily the wherewithal or the opportunity to understand how the industry is, giving everyone sort of a chance to use what they want to do as something that is powerful for them. And making sure that, again, you don't look at everyone through a sort of biased lens, right? You don't group everyone together just because they have a similar background and they look the same. I think in a lot of cases, the universities are starting to become more diverse. I mean, in the last few that I've gone to, in terms of enrollment, there have been record numbers of a more diverse sort of matriculation within the school. And I think the biggest thing about that is just making sure that we aren't just taking in people, but we're supporting them from an institutional standpoint by giving them resources, giving them lectures, giving them the education. For instance, in this sort of case, the education about, the Asian experience, like that education could be how to translate here's what you don't know about college if you have never been to college. This is not just, Asian or like diversity based on, skin color. It's diversity based on socioeconomic status. This is, everything, in first generation college students as well. I mean, there's a whole group of people that need help and resources. And as I work at a land grant institution, as different colleges, I think it's incumbent on them to really provide resources and to provide access to things that their students would not typically have. And so in terms of the preparation for people going out into the field, just reminding them that they have to be advocates for themselves. They have to make sure that they are operating at the highest level possible, and that they put, that their product that, I mean, because when it comes down to it, as a singer, we are a product of our voices and our stage presence, that the product that they are providing actually fits within the confines of the professionalism within the world. I mean, there's a certain level of singing that has to be done at a certain level of opera house, right? And so as a result, I think very often education is sometimes a little bit heavy-handed with numbers, and we want to make sure we are graduating enough people, we get enough people in the door, and we're not really looking in terms of how our curriculum is effective, the effectiveness of our curriculum as well. And I think that in general is something, at least in music schools, that we can continue to look toward and build toward, so that the singers who come through don't feel like they are unprepared for a world going forward. And that's, that's within everything. That's, financial realities of being a singer, but also like understanding that sometimes, when I was at Manhattan School of Music, a few of my colleagues, I remember one of them, he was a fabulous singer. He's singing all over. He's one of the greatest voices I've ever heard. And I remember he said after an audition that the panel asked him what his aria was about. And because English was his second language, and he speaks English really well as well, he froze up and couldn't really respond. And as a result, they took it as he didn't do the work, as if, that because he couldn't speak English, he couldn't actually understand what this text is about. And that to me is just something that, as the industry continues to evolve, I think that is weaning itself out, right? Because we're allowing people to have time and feel more comfortable. But it's just one of the things that really always has stuck with me in terms of like how the school itself should have been in a place to either acknowledge this fact or give him the resources to understand that this might be asked, right? And very often I think they're like, oh, you sing great, bravo. And there's all these extra things that go into getting you hired. I mean, I wish it was just the great, if it was just only singing, but it's not only singing, and it's never been only singing. So we have to acknowledge the fact that some people in a diverse population need more of a resources, more of an advocate, I would say, within the system, for them to really have their voice shine as brightly as possible.
And something that we're interested in at AOA is the fact that, like Elaine said, there are a lot of Asian students in universities, conservatories, but what we don't see is them then entering the professional field. So we're interested to see what happens in between being at university and then being in professionals in our industry, because it's amazing how many students you see in universities and how few you see in our industry. There's another question if no one else has anything else to add to that. The question's on Orientalism. When is it appropriate to use that term? So I'm not a scholar on Orientalism, but I remember like my grandma when I was maybe a teenager, she called herself Oriental, and I remember thinking, oh, grandma, that's not a good term to use anymore, but she was born in early 1900s, and but Orientalism, the way I understand it, and someone else can correct me if they're wrong, is it's a type of like art or literature that takes the Western or European views and puts how they think things in the Orient might have been or might be. A great book to read is Phil Chan's Final Bow for Yellowface. You will learn a whole lot from him in his book. But one of the things he talks about is that Orientalism became an escape. So in Europe, when they wanted to write plays or operas or ballets or whatever about something that was taboo in their own society, the way they did that was they set it in the Orient, somewhere far away where no one really knew what was happening. They didn't know how those people over there were, what they were doing. So it was okay over there. Of course, it wouldn't be okay in our European society, but it's fine over there. And so I think the way I understand is, it's from the Western European view of what might be. I don't know if anyone else has another, but it's a type, it's an art form. So I think Orientalist is an okay word to use.
Yeah, it's a okay word to use. It's basically it's binary thoughts like Westerner and Easterner and masculine or female. So they always treat like Easterner as a female character, which is weak, soft, gentle, something the words to describe female, and then to treat Western as a masculine and power, manpower, like really has the power people. So it's kind of binary thought, and we use it a lot in the scholar, but it's okay to use it. I think it's an okay word. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions. And so I just want to thank you for this time that I've got to get to know you and visit more about the Asian Opera Alliance. And I just want to encourage any of you that are out there that haven't watched the Montana Mikado to get some tickets. This is the last weekend, and continue this conversation. If you've missed some of these, they are all recorded. They're listed on the Intermountain Opera site, so you can go out and watch them. And if you have questions, I said, don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and ask questions. And I know sometimes it's hard and scary to try to figure out how to support others, and maybe it's different than you've ever experienced, but my experience is through it. And when I've done the work and I've learned about a people and their culture, I always feel so blessed. I feel like that there's a part of me that is complete for a second in understanding someone's story. And so I just encourage you guys to lean into what we're doing at Intermountain Opera, and also what Nina and the group are doing at the Asian Opera Alliance, because I think that this is a really important conversation. And sometimes it's really hard to have those important conversations because it feels awkward, and maybe you feel guilty, or maybe you feel it like you've done something wrong. But what I've found in this kind of work is that every day is a lesson that you're learning and getting better. And so I would take an opportunity just to check out the Asian Opera Alliance on their website and look at their resources, because some of them I didn't hear of. And this week I was able to take part in some of them, and it felt really good. And, I watched the Mikado last Friday, and, I just keep finding things that can kind of fill in the pieces of maybe things that I didn't know. I mean, I was a college student here at Montana State before I even heard that there was an internment camp in Montana. And I was horrified. I'm like, what? So a lot of times just learning the history of a people and understanding what that would be like, I think, is something that the arts can give us sometimes, but also it starts conversations. I believe the arts gives us an opportunity to start conversations in a way that isn't scary or hard. It's just telling a story. I think Nina said that best. So thank you for your time. I'm going to hand it back over to Corey. But thank you for coming and being with us in Bozeman just for this hour. And if you're in town, come visit us, and we'll go and eat at Iho's or somewhere else.
All
Yes.
for doing really hard work. We are so thankful to you for doing this and having these important conversations. Thank you.
I know I get to be the face of Intermountain Opera tonight, but there are so many people that did such hard work on this, including Corey at the library. And it was such a great collaboration that we were able to have. And so thank you to Corey for making this happen for us.
Thank you all. These have been really enlightening sessions over the last 5 weeks. So it's been a pleasure from the library's point of view to program alongside with the Montana Mikado. These will all be available on the library's YouTube channel. That's the Bozeman Public Library YouTube, as well as on the Intermountain Opera website. There was a little glitch in last week's, but yours should be up soon. You can find more programs surrounding arts, culture, business, and all kinds of things that are always free and available to the public at the Bozeman Public Library. And you can always ask questions to get more information on tricky subjects or anything else that you might want to learn. So if there are no further questions from our lovely audience tonight, I think we can call it for the evening. thank everybody so much for joining us from afar and wherever we are. Thanks all. Have a good evening. Take care.
Thank you.